It's an amazing gift to be worshiping and sharing in worship together here this morning with you all again. I was here about a year ago and had the privilege of also preaching Hebrew poetry. If you remember, it was an unfortunately long message about the book of Job. I was tasked to preach the entire book in 20 minutes. I think I did it in 22, so it's not too bad. So now I'm back preaching Hebrew poetry from the Psalms, and I got to pick this time, but I picked the fourth longest psalm in the entire collection. So it seems like it's a me thing as much as anything else, but it is a great blessing. When I walk through the doors of Knox, I feel at home. When I walk through the doors of this sanctuary here, I feel in worship. When I engage with the people of this congregation, I feel in community. I'm deeply thankful, and for some smiling faces I see hiding out there in the community that I haven't seen in a long time. But I'm good to be here, and I want to kind of just kick us off with this troubling idea. Well, actually, I'm sorry. Before I do that, I need to say I am a one of the hordes of victims of pickleball, and I blew out my right knee, a couple tears in the meniscus a few weeks ago. My wife encouraged me to wear the big brace this morning. It was just too much. I didn't want to hobble in here. So I've got a brace on under this. So I sit because I wasn't in protest of your worship. I was just trying to respect my wife and my doctor. And so today I sit. But nonetheless, it's not me. It's the Lord and the Spirit of God and the Word of God that we gather around. So thank you for indulging me. And when we're all done, I won't stand at the back like I normally might. I'm going to go find a place to sit. Please come sit, say hi, tell me what was wrong with the message, whatever. It would be lovely, absolutely lovely to spend a little time with you saying good morning. But this idea, you ever prayed for God just to step in? I bet you have, unless this is like your very first time in church or something. Maybe even then. Most of my life's prayers like that have been pretty, simple. And they really come down to, God, would you change my situation? Even sometimes I didn't study for my test, but I need to maintain my A average. God, I'm going to need your help on this one. That wasn't me, that was hypothetical. I didn't have an A average. But you get the idea. But sometimes, in my experience, actually, unfortunately, most of the time, I don't get the answer that I'm looking for. God changed my circumstances. God does something else. Your congregation here, Dave and Becca, planning a summer, planning time away, filling the pulpit, desperate to not have to invite me back. But here we are. God does not always do what we want God to do. So this psalm, it's long, as I said, so I'm not just gonna read it. We're gonna cover sections, but I'm gonna do actually what I did with Job, and I'm kind of gonna take you through piece by piece, and then we're gonna kind of wrap back around to this really hard idea. There have been so many circumstances in my life that I just desperately wished God would change. And I suspect that most of us come here today with something in us, some circumstance, some part of us, some bit of history, some wound, some trauma, something that we just desperately wish God would heal or change, fix. And so in this psalm, we learn to call out to God. So I want to do a little reading here with you, and the first 3 verses of the psalm are these words of love. And David, this is a psalm of David, and most of us know a lot about the story of David, and he experienced a lot of deliverance and help and rescue from God. So after some rescue, he wrote this. And it follows through a bit of a pattern. It's a psalm of praise. It's celebrating God's rescue. And we come together this morning. Again, I have all the confidence in the world that you and me and People we know and love need some form of rescue. So we embrace this psalm as a psalm for us, a psalm that reflects our life, that provides us guidance. And it starts out this way. It says, I love you, O Lord, my strength. I invite you as I read, in your heart, in your mind, to repeat keywords or ideas, and let them be yours this morning. I love you, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My God, my rock in whom I take refuge, my shield, and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. I call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised, and so shall I be saved from my enemies. Every time I get to that part of this verse, that last little bit, I have the same little struggle. If anybody knows the old church song that you'd always have to sing it around. I can't sing, so I didn't raise my hand earlier about the singing thing. But, I will call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised. So I get stuck there. And so that rolls in my head and now in yours. And so we approach this in community together. What a beautiful way to start. I often wake in the morning thinking about what I must do. I often go to sleep at night thinking about what I must do tomorrow, what I did today, what went undone today. It's true, I often do. And I try to remind myself when I wake in the morning and when I go to bed at night to start here, to celebrate God's love and power in my life and make that the thing upon which I lay my head down at night and the thing upon which I rise in the morning and the thing that holds me through the day. But some days are not as easy as others, and so we arrive at verse 4, and it says, the cords of death encompassed me. I like this next line. The torrents of perdition assailed me. The cords of Sheol entangled me. The snares of death confronted me. There's a little bit of a Hebrew parallelism going on here, but it really kind of covers every kind of death you can imagine. Physical death, spiritual death. This is like death of every kind, and it is coming at me. I don't know what to do. I feel completely wound up and bound up by this thing in my life. I can't seem to get rid of it. I'm being choked out and drowned by it. I'm afraid that I may lose everything because of it. So it gets real serious here. And it gets real beyond us. I don't like being beyond myself. It's another way to say you ever ski, you talk about getting out over your skis. It's an uncomfortable place to be. I like to imagine myself as capable and competent. But we get beyond ourselves. It's part of life. And when we feel this way, we remind ourselves that we are not alone. We can call for help. And so we arrive at verse 6, and it says, in my distress, I called upon the Lord. To my God, I cried for help. In your own way this morning, I do hope that you will in some way recognize where you are beyond yourself. That the Spirit of God would draw you into that uncomfortable place, and that you would find in your heart and in your faith and in your mind the desire and the will to call out to God. Say, I need your help. I love these next few verses, and we're up through verse 6, and now verses 7 through 19 are this sort of powerful rescue that shows up, and I want to read a selection of these for you. Verse 7, then the earth reeled and rocked, and the foundations also of the mountains trembled and quaked because he was angry. Oh, the idea that God might be angry for you, not at you. angry at the things that hold you back, the things that bring you fear, that God would angrily rescue you with enormous power. Jumping in again at verse 12. Out of the brightness before him there broke through his clouds hailstones and coals of fire. The Lord also thundered in the heavens, and the Most High uttered his voice. And he sent out his arrows, and he scattered them, he flashed forth lightning and routed them. And the channels of the sea were seen, and the foundations of the world were laid bare. At your rebuke, O Lord, at the blast of the breath of your nostrils, he reached down from on high, he took me, he drew me out of mighty waters, he delivered me from my strong enemy. I hope some part of you knows how to feel the hope, the relief, and the power of God reaching down to rescue you. Doesn't always look the way we want it to look. But our faith, every part of our faith, is a calling to recognize that we are made in God's image, that we are sent in God's mission, that we are equipped and sustained by God to do. We have purpose. David had purpose. We have purpose. And God would walk with you, arrive for you in all of his might and power for you, to help you break free from the cords that entangle you toward death and from the torrents that would carry you away, that you might live more fully in God's love and light and more fully express your calling in this world, to be life, to be beauty, to be hope, to be help, to be everything that God would have you be. And I hope together we can feel a sense of that great rescue. I remember a time when I was I had this same kind of feeling. I've had it many times in my life. This one in particular is kind of an interesting story, but it illustrates this for me in an unusual way. And I used to run a basketball club in Evanston, and that many years ago I also played. So we had fun out there, and it was an open thing, and word got out in the community, and it became really, really interesting. And we would have about 50 people show up on a Monday night and just sort of rotate in and off the court. And we had professional athletes showing up. We had former NBA players showing up, Canadian Football League, baseball, all kinds of professional athletes. We had college athletes showing up. We also had a bunch of people who were very athletic, but never sort of made it to that spot. But I would also say about 75% of the people who came there were young men from various gangs from around the city. And so despite my greatest efforts, it was very street ball in that church. And there was a lot of chatter and a lot of chirping and a few choice words, a lot of those. And I would try to rein it all in, but this was my court. This was my ministry. I invited people to come and share in this space with me. I opened the doors, I shut the doors. So over time, I got very close to a bunch of these young men, and we would sit after basketball and talk about life. They would ask me the most unusual questions, and I would get the privilege of asking them questions about their life's journey and how and why. Why did you choose to be in this gang? Why are you? They had criminal histories, but we developed quite the loving kind of relationship, and they looked out for me. But every week there were new folks that came in there, and they didn't always know who I was. I was important there. I was important to these guys. And one day we had a new guy in there, and I always play a little rough, use my body, throw some elbows. I do what it takes, So I got tangled up under the hoop with some guy that I didn't know. We both fell down. That's just basketball. No big deal. He hops up and he grabs the ball and he just chucks it at my head, angry, raging. And I just kind of, and instantly, 12 of the biggest dudes you can imagine surrounded this guy. It just collapsed on him. And they said, "You don't mess with that guy." I think there were probably 4 different gangs represented in that moment. I felt protected. There were forces at play that were beyond me. There were powers in the room that I did not understand. But this one young man, that particular day, found his correction, and I found my rescue. It would be bad if things went sideways in a room like that. You never know who you might make angry, who might carry a grudge, who might actually have something on him to act in a way that would be really, really negative for everyone there. But what a beautiful feeling to experience God showing up in our lives and rescuing us. So the psalm, it goes on, verses 20 through 36, and this is where we New Testament folks sometimes will struggle. So I want to give you some insight into this. See, David says, "Yes, God, you rewarded me according to my righteousness." Well, I want to say this. God always rewards us according to our righteousness. Keep listening. You turn off what you're listening to now because that idea threatens you that you may miss the best part. We remember as followers of Jesus that it's Jesus' righteousness that we carry. Our songs this morning highlighted that for us. God always rewards us according to our righteousness, but as a follower of Jesus, it is that righteousness that I carry. My life is imperfect. My wife is here with me this morning too, so if you want to verify anything, she'll be here after the service. She doesn't have a whole lot of filters, so, feel free. We are imperfect. I don't know what you brought in with you this morning. What guilt, what shame, what fear, what mistakes that may still be tied around you. But it is not that. It is not that level of righteousness from which God will rescue you. It is Christ's righteousness. Hebrews 4:16 says, "Therefore let us draw near with confidence to the throne of grace, so that we may receive mercy and find help in our time of need." Because of Jesus, let us draw near to the throne of grace and find help and mercy in our time of need. And then the psalm will go on, 37 through 50. And this is where God steps in and evil is destroyed, and it's about the victory. And it's about the victory. So as you read this in your life and on your time and so on, remember that in this section of the psalm, it's about God's victory. Sometimes we get hung up on little details here or there, and I said this last time I was here, but this is Hebrew poetry, and my recommendation for you as you engage with it is that it is better to be experienced than reasoned, and I said that about Job last time. It doesn't mean there's not something here to reason. It doesn't mean we shouldn't use our minds, but it's a poem, it's a song. It's meant to elicit feelings from us. It's meant to draw us into certain places. And it's coming from a different place. It's coming from the Old Testament and the law. It's not coming from the Testament of grace. It's not coming from the New Covenant. But read it through that lens and understand it as God stepping in and destroying what is evil and bringing victory. And so I want to invite you to move this morning now from thinking in a physical way, God deliver me, God change my circumstances, to a spiritual one. And this is very Jesus. Jesus is very interested in inviting our lives to take that kind of shift. We said this a minute ago, but David, he had a calling. He was to be king of a physical kingdom. And you too are called to that kingdom. We, as followers of Jesus, are called to be builders of a kingdom. You have a calling. God has purpose for you in your life. And so I want to kind of take a minute and look at the David piece of this. David is a young guy, youngest son of 8. Herding the sheep. It was the job of the most lowly in the family to take care of the animals. And then this guy shows up one day, this prophet, and he's looking for the new king of Israel. It's kind of an odd situation. And he goes through all the other sons, the oldest, no, it's not this guy, and then so on. And we get to, he's like, is there anybody left? They didn't even bring David out, Isn't there somebody else? I feel like there's got to be somebody else. And so, get David. And sure enough, it's David, and this young man, he's probably 14, 15 years old, and he gets anointed the king of Israel by a prophet of God. That's got to be smooth sailing from there, right? Yeah, well, we know how that works. As we enter this, I want to ask you again, from what do you need to be delivered? And to what are you called? It's the intersection of these places that God will be most powerful in your life. So this is what that might look like if we're going to take David's journey. Well, so the Spirit of God leaves Saul, that anointing from God to be the king, and Saul starts to struggle and get depressed and so on. And his people think, well, let's find a musician to play some nice songs for him. And they find David. So suddenly this guy finds himself in the king's court. Oh, see, smooth sailing, right? He's this guy taking care of some sheep, and now suddenly he's playing songs for the king, and he's supposed to be a king coming up. So this makes sense. And then he becomes the armor bearer to the king. Well, and then the king gets anxious and jealous, and he himself, King Saul himself, tries to kill David twice, assassinate him by his own hand twice. He fails. And in the course of David's late teen years, say 14, 15 to about 20, he spends most of that time trying not to die. That is not the entry point to kingship that you might imagine. But we know some of these other stories, and then by 21, David's like this military leader. And after Saul fails to kill David himself, he starts to bring in assassins to do it for him. And of course, they fail. But this is what we like to call in the business, an unhealthy relationship. So David is in the court of the king, playing music and fighting for his life on a regular basis. This is tough. It's a tough place to minister. So then around 21 years old, David is finally to the place where he feels he must flee. So David runs and he hides, and some of the military men that have followed him go with him. And they are on the run, living in caves, trying to figure out what to eat next. They get hungry. They are constantly being followed by Saul's military men who are seeking to kill them. David had a rough run in his 20s. And at 30, finally, David is made king, but just of part of the nation. The journey was the place in which David was brought to and forged for his calling. So I wonder, what exactly was David delivered from? I would suggest to you, in this case, he was delivered from everything that would keep him from living out his calling. Yes, God saved his life, but what's really interesting is, like I said, I tend to want God to deliver me from my situation and my circumstances, but God didn't do that. God kept David alive, kept him from starving to death, and he sustained him, sustained his faith through this brutal, fearful journey before finally delivering him to the place of his calling. So from what do we need to be delivered? From what do you and I need to be delivered? Sometimes I'd like to, honestly, I would love to somebody pray for this knee and just be like, let's fix that up right now. But so far, of the hundreds of broken things and injuries I've given myself over the years, none of them have been miraculously healed. But I welcome it. I'm not bring it, let's do it. But God seems to sort of say no to that, in my life at least. What do I need to be delivered from? And what I find in my life that I need to be delivered from are things more like, fear, low self-esteem, anxiousness, all kinds of things that might hold me back from living fully into what God has for me. And so I think for us as New Testament followers of Jesus, we want to hear these words from Paul, Colossians 3:1-3. Take this thorn, Paul says. Sorry, I jumped ahead on you. That's not the thorn. Well, as soon as I said that, I was like, well, that's not it. I wanted to read Colossians 3. That's why I jumped ahead, because it's in here, not over here. But it says this: so if you have been raised with Christ, and you indeed have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things that are above, not on the things that are on earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. Seek the things that are above. I think often at this. I know I'm way, way too young to have these thoughts, but I imagine retirement someday. Oh my gosh, that's just so far away. But will I have enough? Can I retire? Can I afford to retire? What will I need to do in retirement to sustain my family? How will that work? I worry about that. I'm currently paying Naperville taxes. I don't think I can sustain that. My kids. I have been expecting grandchildren now for a while, and they are not in the game. But, I've done more to my knees and my ankles and my bones and my joints over the years than I'd care to reflect on. And I wonder, will I be mobile to play with my grandkids if I ever get any? And if I can't, will I at least be able to volunteer at the kids at church? Can I move? Honestly, I worry about that. I got to take care of this body, I want to crawl around on the floor with them little ones and, get them all worked up and then hand them back to the parents. Paul said, take this thorn from me, God. Right? We know that one. 3 times he prayed, and God said no. God said, my power is perfected in your weakness. My power is perfected in your weakness, and my grace is sufficient for you. Jesus said, take this cup from me, but it didn't happen that way, did it? And even in our Lord's Prayer, you can read through a bunch of translations online or sometimes, but there's this line, deliver us from evil. I personally believe, and I'm not alone in this, I think the best translation of that is to deliver us through evil, to sustain us amid evil. It's not to take this thing or situation or circumstance out of our lives. No, we are to be in the world, but not of the world. I think the prayer is for us to say, God, sustain me in the middle of all of this. Sustain my faith, sustain my commitment to be life and light and hope and goodness and beauty and generosity, whatever I'm called to for the world around me. If I had time, I'd love to tell you about how I first encountered this psalm. But I'll simply say this: I was a young man, and I was getting exactly what I had prayed for. I was exactly where I wanted to be. I had prayed for God to send me to the mission field, and I was in Alaska doing mission work with a group. And I had been praying for 6 months, being young and foolish. I had prayed every day for 6 months. God, I want you to teach me how to love. And God said, yes. And that led me to one of the most painful seasons I would ever experience in my life thus far. I was exactly where I wanted to be, exactly where God wanted me to be, and I felt so alone. I felt so broken, so confused. There were days I couldn't do evangelism. There was a line we were taught to use out there, and God loves you and has a wonderful plan for your life. It's from an old gospel tract, The Four Spiritual Laws. And I couldn't get myself to tell people that because I found that following Jesus was way too hard for that. And I called out to God over that season. And I found community, I found encouragement, I found hope, I found ministry, I found all kinds of things. I'd love to tell you more about it sometime. But I did not find God taking away the challenge or the hardship. And so what can we expect from God as I wrap this up on this journey? I believe that as we encounter God in this way, as we take this risky steps of faith to be transformed, we find from God the ability to be sustained amid the challenges. I think we find the gift of community where we choose to not be alone in the struggle. We bring it into the light, and in community where we can find love and support and encouragement, and we find the transformation of our lives, where we can be healed from the things that we carry, our own bitterness, our woundedness, and so on, that we might be a brighter light in the world. So I ask finally one more time, from what do you need to be delivered so that you can more fully live in, enjoy, and express your calling? Amen.